The Servant's Secret. The night Mr. Whitmore died in the East Wing bedroom, I knew something was terribly wrong long before the ambulance arrived. It wasn't just the way his breathing had changed during those final hours, that rattling sound that comes when death is close. No, this was different. This was the cold certainty that comes from serving the same family for 43 years, learning to read the shadows in every corner of Ashford Manor, understanding when something doesn't belong. Because while young Master Thomas wept at his godfather's bedside and the household staff whispered prayers in the hallway, I saw something that made my blood run colder than the January wind howling outside. That woman, Miss Vivienne Blackwood, the one who'd shown up 6 months ago claiming to be Mr. Whitmore's distant niece from London, she stood by the window with her back to everyone. Her reflection in the glass showed no tears. No grief. Just satisfaction, like a chess player who'd finally achieved checkmate. And when Dr. Harrison pronounced the time of death at 11:47 p.m., Miss Vivienne's hand moved to her pocket. A quick, deliberate motion. She pulled out something small, glanced at it briefly, then slipped it back. Nobody else noticed. But I did. Because that's what 43 years of service teaches you. You see everything, even when people think you're invisible. My name is Margaret Hayes. I've been head housekeeper at Ashford Manor since 1981, when I was barely 20 years old. I've polished every banister, laundered every sheet, kept every secret this house has held. I watched young Thomas grow from a crying baby to the 28-year-old man now inheriting one of Boston's oldest fortunes. I served his parents until they died in that car accident 5 years ago. And I served their closest friend, Richard Whitmore, during his frequent visits to the manor, visits that became longer and more permanent after Thomas's parents died, when Mr. Whitmore stepped in as Thomas's guardian and financial advisor. The Ashford fortune was considerable. Old textile money, invested wisely over generations. Thomas's father had trusted Richard Whitmore implicitly, made him executor of the estate, gave him power of attorney should anything happen. When the accident occurred, Mr. Whitmore had moved into the manor temporarily to help manage things. That was 5 years ago. He'd been here ever since, living in the East Wing, managing Thomas's inheritance until the boy, as he still called him, turned 30. But 6 months ago, everything changed when Vivienne Blackwood arrived. She'd appeared at the manor's front door on a rainy September evening, all designer luggage and practiced charm, claiming to be Mr. Whitmore's brother's granddaughter from his first marriage. She had documents, photographs, a whole story about growing up in London, losing touch with the family, wanting to reconnect before it was too late. Mr. Whitmore had seemed genuinely surprised but pleased. He'd welcomed her, given her rooms in the South Wing, introduced her to Thomas's family. Within a week, she'd made herself indispensable. She took an interest in the estate management, asked intelligent questions about investments and property holdings. She was beautiful in that calculated way, blonde hair always perfect, clothes always elegant but never ostentatious. She flattered Mr. Whitmore, deferred to his wisdom, called him Uncle Richard with affection that seemed genuine. Thomas fell for her like a stone dropping into a well. I'd tried to warn him, in the subtle way servants learn to warn their employers. Miss Blackwood seems very interested in the estate papers, sir. Has Mr. Whitmore verified Miss Blackwood's documentation with the family lawyers? But Thomas was lonely. His parents were gone, his godfather was aging, and suddenly here was this sophisticated, intelligent woman who seemed to understand his world. They were engaged within 3 months. Mr. Whitmore had seemed uncomfortable with the engagement but never said anything directly. In retrospect, I wonder if he'd begun to suspect something but couldn't prove it. Or perhaps he felt guilty about something, some secret connection to Vivienne that made him complicit in whatever game she was playing. The night he died, we'd all gathered for what was supposed to be a celebration dinner. Thomas had closed a major business deal, his first significant independent achievement. Cook had prepared Mr. Whitmore's favorite meal, roast duck with cherry sauce. I'd supervised the table settings myself, made sure everything was perfect. But Mr. Whitmore had barely eaten. He'd looked pale, distracted, kept glancing at Vivienne with an expression I couldn't quite read. Fear, maybe. Or recognition. After dinner, he'd asked to speak with Thomas privately in the library. They'd been in there for nearly an hour, their voices rising and falling, too muffled for me to hear clearly even when I'd passed by with fresh linens, as I'd deliberately arranged to do. When Thomas emerged, he'd looked shaken. When I'd asked if everything was all right, he'd just shaken his head and gone upstairs. Mr. Whitmore had gone to his room in the East Wing shortly after. An hour later, he'd rung for me, said he felt unwell, asked me to fetch Dr. Harrison. By the time the doctor arrived, Mr. Whitmore was struggling to breathe. By midnight, he was gone. The official cause would be listed as heart failure. Mr. Whitmore was 74, had a history of high blood pressure. Nobody questioned it. Nobody except me. After the ambulance took the body away and the house finally fell silent around 2 a.m., I did something I'd never done in 43 years of service. I went through someone's belongings without permission. I slipped into Mr. Whitmore's room in the East Wing, the room that still smelled faintly of his cologne and the antiseptic scent of death. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Evidence, I supposed. Proof of the wrongness I felt in my bones. His desk was neat, as always. Papers organized in folders, pens arranged just so. But there was a leather journal, the kind with a small lock, sitting in the top drawer. The lock was flimsy. I'd replaced enough of them over the years to know how they worked. A hairpin, a gentle twist, and it opened. The journal entries went back 6 months, starting the week after Vivienne arrived. September 18th, she knows. God help me, she knows everything. How did she find out? How did she find me here? September 25th, confronted her today. She showed me copies of the letters, the payments, the certificates. She has proof of everything. She's known all along who she really is. October 10th, she wants what she calls justice. I call it blackmail. But what choice do I have? If she tells Thomas the truth about his father, about me, about all of it, everything his parents built will be destroyed. November 3rd, she's engaged to Thomas now. This is my fault. I should have stopped it, but how could I without revealing everything? The boy would be devastated. He'd lose everything, his inheritance, his family name, his entire identity. December 15th, I have to tell him. I can't let this go any further. Vivienne isn't who she claims to be. She's not my brother's granddaughter. She's much more dangerous than that. Tomorrow I'll tell Thomas everything. Better he hate me for what I did than lose everything to her schemes. December 28th, tonight I tell him. I've prepared documents, evidence. He'll understand why I kept the secret. He has to. It was to protect him, to protect his parents' memory. But now he needs to know before it's too late. Before Vivienne destroys everything. That was the last entry. December 28th. The night he died. My hands shook as I read those words. What secret had Mr. Whitmore been keeping? What did Vivienne really want? And most terrifying, what had she done to silence him before he could tell Thomas the truth? I carefully photographed every page of the journal with my phone, a device I'd only recently learned to use properly. Then I locked the journal again, placed it exactly where I'd found it, and slipped out of the room like a ghost. Back in my small quarters on the third floor, servants' quarters that I'd occupied for more than 4 decades, I sat on my narrow bed and tried to think clearly. I was 71 years old, a servant, a woman of no particular importance to anyone except as someone who kept the manor running smoothly. Who would listen to me if I claimed Mr. Whitmore had been murdered? Who would believe that the beautiful, charming Miss Blackwood was actually some kind of con artist or worse? But I had to try. Because young Thomas was in danger. Because whatever Vivienne was planning, whatever secret Mr. Whitmore had been keeping, it wasn't finished. The real game was just beginning. I waited until a decent hour, until the sky was beginning to lighten with winter dawn, and then I knocked on Thomas's bedroom door. He answered looking exhausted, eyes red from crying. "Margaret. What is it? Is something wrong? May I speak with you privately, sir?" "It's about Mr. Whitmore." He let me in, and I told him everything. About Vivienne's reaction at the death, about the journal, about my suspicions. I showed him the photographs I'd taken of the journal entries. He read them slowly, his face growing paler with each page. When he finished, he sat down heavily on his bed. "This doesn't make sense. Uncle Richard was going to tell me something about Vivienne? About my parents? What secret could be so terrible?" "I don't know, sir. But I think we need to find out before Miss Blackwood gets what she's really after." "You think she killed him?" It wasn't a question. I think Mr. Whitmore died very conveniently, right before he was going to expose her. Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then he looked up at me with something new in his eyes. Not the boy I'd watched grow up, but a man finally understanding that not everyone could be trusted. "What do we do?" "First, we find out who Vivienne Blackwood really is. Then we find out what secret Mr. Whitmore was keeping. And then, we prove what she did. And if we can't prove it?" I thought about 43 years of watching this family, of keeping their secrets, of protecting them in the quiet ways servants do. Then we find another way to stop her. The funeral was held 3 days later. It was a small affair. Mr. Whitmore had outlived most of his friends. Thomas gave a brief eulogy, his voice breaking as he talked about the man who'd stepped in as a father figure after his parents died. Vivienne stood beside him, dressed in black, holding his hand, the picture of supportive grief. I watched her from the back of the chapel, and she never once looked at the casket. Her eyes kept scanning the room, watching people, calculating something. After the service, everyone returned to the manor for the wake. I supervised the catering staff, made sure everything was perfect, played my role. But I also watched. Observed. Listened to conversations. That's when I overheard Vivienne talking to Thomas's lawyer, Mr. Pemberton, in the library. The door was slightly ajar. I paused in the hallway with a tray of glasses, invisible as always. "Need to settle the estate quickly," Vivienne was saying. "Thomas has been through so much. The last thing he needs is a drawn-out probate process." "Mr. Whitmore's will is straightforward," Pemberton replied. "He left everything to a trust, managed by Thomas until specific conditions are met." "What conditions?" "That's between Thomas and the trust documents." "But surely as Thomas's fiancée, I have a right to know how his finances are structured." "When you're married, perhaps. Not before." Pemberton's voice was cool. He'd never warmed to Vivienne either. Old lawyers develop good instincts about people. Vivienne's tone changed, became warmer, more vulnerable. I'm just trying to help Thomas. He's so overwhelmed. I thought if I could handle some of the administrative details. Very kind of you, Miss Blackwood. But unnecessary. After Pemberton left, I heard something crash in the library. I pushed the door open to find Vivienne standing by the fireplace, a crystal glass shattered at her feet, her face twisted with rage. When she saw me, the mask slid back into place instantly. "Oh, Margaret, I'm so clumsy. Could you clean this up?" "Of course, miss." I bent to gather the glass, and that's when I saw it. Under the corner of the Persian rug, something white was sticking out. An envelope. I waited until Vivienne left, then pulled it out carefully. It was addressed to Thomas, in Mr. Whitmore's handwriting. It had been opened. Inside was a letter and a small brass key. "Thomas, if you're reading this, I'm gone and I didn't get the chance to tell you face to face. I'm sorry, my boy. Sorry for everything. The woman calling herself Vivienne Blackwood is not who she claims to be. Her real name is Vivienne Ashford. She's your half-sister. Your father had an affair 30 years ago, before he married your mother. The woman's name was Catherine Ashford. Your father paid her to keep quiet, paid her for years, and I helped him do it. I managed the secret accounts, made sure the payments continued. Catherine died 5 years ago, and Vivienne discovered everything. She's come to claim what she believes is rightfully hers, half of the Ashford fortune. But Thomas, the estate is protected. Your grandfather's trust explicitly states the inheritance goes to legitimate heirs only. If Vivienne's connection to your father becomes known, she gets nothing. That's why she's trying to marry you. Once she's your wife, she'll have legal access to everything. And she'll destroy you to get it. The key opens a safe deposit box at Boston First Bank, Box 247. Inside you'll find all the proof, the affair, the payments, Catherine's death certificate, and Vivienne's birth certificate showing your father as her biological parent. Stop this marriage, Thomas. She's dangerous. She's already threatened to expose everything if I try to stop her. By the time you read this, I may be dead. If I am, know that it wasn't natural causes. Protect yourself. Trust no one except Margaret. She's been loyal to this family longer than anyone. She'll help you. I'm sorry I failed you. Richard. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the letter. Thomas's half-sister. Mr. Whitmore had been helping his father hide an illegitimate child for 30 years. And now that child had come back for revenge, or justice, or whatever twisted thing she called it. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Quickly, I folded the letter, pocketed it along with the key, and picked up the tray of broken glass. Vivienne appeared in the doorway. All cleaned up? Her voice was pleasant, but her eyes were sharp. Yes, miss. Will there be anything else? Actually, Margaret, I've been meaning to talk to you. She stepped closer. After Thomas and I are married, we'll be making some changes to the household staff. You've served the family admirably, but we'll need someone younger, someone more in tune with modern household management. We'll of course provide a generous severance package. She was firing me. Clearing out the one person who'd been here long enough to know the family's secrets, the one person who might see through her lies. I understand, miss. I kept my voice neutral. When would you like me to leave? After the wedding would be appropriate. We're thinking March. Small ceremony, just family. Very good, miss. I carried the broken glass out, my mind racing. I had until March. 3 months to expose Vivienne, to save Thomas, to protect the family I'd served my entire adult life. That night, I took the key and the letter to Thomas. He read it twice, his face going through a dozen emotions. Shock, betrayal, anger, grief. My father had another child. Another daughter. And Vivienne is my half-sister. Yes, sir. She's been planning this from the beginning. The whole relationship, the engagement, all of it was to get access to the trust. That appears to be the case. He looked up at me, and I saw his father in his face, the same stubborn determination that had built the Ashford fortune. We need to go to that bank. Get those documents. Confront her with proof. With respect, sir, if we confront her directly, we risk her fleeing or worse. She's already killed once, I believe. She won't hesitate to do whatever is necessary to protect herself. You really think she killed Uncle Richard? His journal shows he was going to expose her. He died that very night, right after dinner. I think she poisoned him, something slow-acting that would look like natural causes. But how? You supervised the entire meal. You were there the whole time. I thought back to that night, replaying every detail. The roasted duck, the cherry sauce, the wine, the dessert. Everything had come from the kitchen under my supervision. Nothing had been tampered with. Unless... The medicine, I said slowly. Mr. Whitmore took blood pressure medication every night. He kept it in his room. And Vivienne had access to his room. She visited him often, brought him tea in the evenings. Thomas stood up, pacing. We need to test that medication. It's likely gone by now, sir. She's clever. She would have disposed of it immediately. Then we need another plan. We need to make her reveal herself. Over the next week, Thomas and I worked together in secret. We went to Boston First Bank, opened the safe deposit box, and found everything Mr. Whitmore had promised. Documents showing years of payments to Catherine Ashford, letters between Thomas's father and Catherine, even photographs of them together. And a birth certificate for Vivienne Rose Ashford, listing Thomas's father as the biological parent. We also found medical records showing Catherine Ashford had died of cancer 5 years ago, right around the time of Thomas's parents' accident. Not suspicious in itself, but the timing was striking. Vivienne had lost her mother and then, almost immediately, Thomas had lost his parents. Had she waited, watched, planned? We made copies of everything, stored the originals in a new safe deposit box at a different bank under my name. Then we set our trap. Thomas had a frank conversation with Mr. Pemberton, his lawyer, explaining everything. Pemberton was horrified but also grimly professional. He drafted a new will for Thomas, one that specifically excluded Vivienne from any inheritance, citing the discovery of fraud in her identity. The will would be signed at a small dinner party, witnessed by Pemberton and myself, making it legally binding. We invited Vivienne to the dinner, telling her it was to finalize some estate matters before the wedding. She came dressed beautifully, all smiles and charm. The dinner was held in the formal dining room, the same room where Mr. Whitmore had eaten his last meal. I served each course myself, just the 4 of us. Thomas, Vivienne, Mr. Pemberton, and myself standing ready to serve. Between the main course and dessert, Mr. Pemberton pulled out the documents. Thomas has asked me to update his will before the wedding, he explained. Standard procedure. Vivienne smiled. Of course. I'm glad he's being prudent. The new will includes several specific provisions, Pemberton continued, reading from the document. All assets to be held in trust, with explicit exclusions for any parties found to have engaged in fraud or misrepresentation regarding their identity or connection to the Ashford family. Vivienne's smile didn't waver, but I saw her hand tighten on her wineglass. That seems reasonable. There's also a provision requiring full disclosure of any biological relationships to the Ashford family line, with DNA testing if necessary. Now the smile slipped, just for a moment. Why would that be necessary? Thomas spoke up, his voice steady. Because I recently discovered I have a half-sister named Vivienne Rose Ashford, daughter of Catherine Ashford and my late father. And I want to make sure she's treated fairly under the law. The silence in the room was absolute. Vivienne's face went through several expressions before settling on cold calculation. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Thomas pulled out the birth certificate, slid it across the table. This is you. You've known all along that you're my half-sister. You came here to claim what you thought was owed to you. But instead of being honest, instead of approaching me as family, you seduced me. You manipulated me. You murdered Richard Whitmore when he tried to expose you. That's absurd. I loved Richard. And I love you, Thomas. You don't love anyone but yourself and whatever twisted sense of justice you think you deserve. Vivienne stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You can't prove anything. That birth certificate could be forged. Those documents could be faked. They're not, and you know it. Thomas stood too. But you're right that proving you murdered Uncle Richard will be difficult. That's why I'm giving you a choice. Leave now, tonight, and never come back. Or I go to the police with everything I have and let them investigate. You won't. You're too soft, Thomas. You've always been too soft. That's when I stepped forward. In my hand was a small digital recorder. Actually, miss, I've been recording this entire conversation. Including your implicit admission that the documents are real, that you knew about your true identity, and your lack of denial regarding Mr. Whitmore's death. Vivienne's eyes went wide with rage. You insignificant little servant. You think anyone cares what you recorded? The police will care, Mr. Pemberton said calmly. Combined with Mr. Whitmore's journal, the suspicious timing of his death, and testimony from Mrs. Hayes about your behavior, it's enough for a proper investigation. Enough to get a warrant to test his remains for toxins. I watched Vivienne's face as she calculated her options. She was cornered and she knew it. Finally, she grabbed her purse. Fine. I'll leave. But you're making a mistake, Thomas. That money should have been mine. My mother suffered because your father refused to do the right thing. She died in poverty while you lived in this mansion. I deserved this. Maybe you did deserve something, Thomas said quietly. Maybe my father should have acknowledged you, helped you. But you don't get to murder people for it. You don't get to manipulate and deceive for revenge. Watch me. Vivienne headed for the door, then paused. By the way, Margaret, you should know, I poisoned you too. That tea I brought to your quarters yesterday? Same thing I gave Richard, just a smaller dose. You have maybe a week before your kidneys start to fail. So enjoy your victory while you can. She left, the door slamming behind her. I felt the color drain from my face. Thomas rushed over. She's bluffing. She has to be. But I remembered the tea, remembered Vivienne appearing at my door with a friendly gesture, a cup of herbal tea to help with my arthritis. I'd drunk it, grateful for the unexpected kindness. We need to get you to a hospital, Thomas said. Now. Mr. Pemberton was already calling 911. The next several hours were a blur. Emergency room, tests, 4 drips. The doctors found elevated levels of thallium in my system, a poison that's slow-acting, tasteless, and if untreated, fatal. But we'd caught it early. I would survive. The police picked up Vivienne at Logan Airport trying to catch a flight to London. When they searched her belongings, they found a bottle of thallium tablets, medical textbooks marked with pages about poisoning symptoms, and a journal of her own, detailing every step of her plan. She'd been planning this for years, ever since her mother died and she'd discovered the documents about her father. She'd researched the Ashford family, learned about Thomas's parents' accident, found out about Richard Whitmore's role in managing the secret payments. She'd come to the manor intending to kill both Richard and Thomas if necessary, inherit everything as Thomas's widow, and then disappear with the fortune she believed was rightfully hers. The trial was sensational. Vivienne was convicted of first-degree murder in Richard Whitmore's death and attempted murder in mine. She was sentenced to life without parole. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering. Thomas visited every day, brought me books and flowers, sat with me even when I was too weak to talk. When I was finally released, he drove me back to the manor personally. "Margaret," he said as we pulled up the drive, "I know you're planning to retire. But I want you to know you'll always have a home here. For as long as you want it. You saved my life." "I was just doing my job, sir." "No. You did far more than that. You protected this family the way you've always protected us. I'll never forget that. I'm still at Ashford Manor. I'm 71 now, officially retired but still living in my quarters on the 3rd floor. Sometimes I help train the new staff, teach them the old ways of running a proper household. Mostly, though, I sit in the garden and watch the seasons change, grateful to be alive." Thomas never married. He's focused on his business, on philanthropy, on being a better man than his father was. He established a foundation in Catherine Ashford's name, helping single mothers and their children. It won't undo the damage his father caused, but it's a start. Every few months, he asks me to sit with him in the library, and we talk about that terrible winter when his godfather died. We talk about the secrets people keep, the harm they cause, and the courage it takes to face the truth. "I think about what Vivienne said sometimes," he told me recently. "About deserving justice. She wasn't entirely wrong, was she? My father did terrible things to her mother. She did deserve something. Justice, yes," I replied. "Revenge, no. There's a difference." He nodded, staring into the fireplace where we'd burned Vivienne's engagement ring after the trial. "How did you know? From the beginning, how did you know she was dangerous?" I thought about it, about those 43 years of service, of watching families from the shadows, of understanding human nature from the servant's perspective. Because I've seen real love, sir. I've seen real grief. I've seen people at their best and worst. And Miss Blackwood never looked at you with love. She looked at you the way someone looks at a locked door, calculating how to break through. That kind of coldness, it's unmistakable once you learn to recognize it. I wish I'd seen it. You were lonely. You were grieving. She took advantage of that. Don't blame yourself. But I knew he still did, a little. Just as I blamed myself for not acting sooner, for not preventing Mr. Whitmore's death. We all carry our guilt, our what-ifs, our if-onlys. The manor is quieter now. Peaceful. The East Wing, where Mr. Whitmore died, has been renovated into a library and study. The South Wing, where Vivienne lived, is now guest quarters for the foundation's beneficiaries when they visit. I walk through these rooms sometimes, late at night when everyone is asleep, and I remember. I remember Thomas's parents, kind people who treated their staff with respect. I remember Richard Whitmore, a flawed man who tried to make amends too late. I remember Vivienne Ashford, whose legitimate pain turned into something poisonous and deadly. And I remember the night I broke 43 years of perfect service to snoop through a dead man's diary, because sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to save the people you've sworn to protect. They say servants see everything. That's true. We move through houses like ghosts, present but invisible, trusted with the most intimate details of people's lives. We know who drinks too much, who cries in the shower, who's having an affair, who's terrified of dying alone. And sometimes, very rarely, we have to step out of the shadows and become something more than servants. We have to become protectors, investigators, warriors even. That's what I learned that winter. That 43 years of loyal service gave me more than just a job. It gave me a family to protect. And when that family was threatened, I found I was capable of more than I ever imagined. I'm old now. My hands shake sometimes, arthritis making the silver polish harder than it used to be. But I'm still here, still watching, still keeping Ashford Manor's secrets. Because that's what we do. We servants. We keep the houses running. We keep the families safe. We keep the secrets that need keeping and expose the ones that need exposing. And we endure. Long after the drama fades, long after the trials end, long after the guilty are punished and the innocent saved, we're still here. Still polishing silver. Still changing linens. Still watching. Still protecting. Thomas asked me once if I ever regretted my life of service, if I wished I'd done something else, had a family of my own, lived a different kind of life. I looked around at Ashford Manor, at the home I'd known for more than 4 decades, at the young man I'd helped raise and protect, and I told him the truth. This is my family, sir. This house, these people. I chose this life, and I'd choose it again. Not everyone finds a purpose that matters. I did. He smiled then, that sad smile he gets sometimes. You saved my life, Margaret. And you gave meaning to mine, sir. That's how families work. They save each other. So here I am, still at Ashford Manor. Still serving. Still watching. Because some stories don't have neat endings. Some stories just continue, day after day, season after season, with the people who survive them learning to live with what they know, what they've done, and who they've become. I survived Vivienne Ashford's poison. Thomas survived her manipulation. The Ashford family survived the secrets that nearly destroyed them. And the manor stands, solid and enduring, keeping its own secrets, sheltering its own ghosts, while life goes on inside its walls. That's enough. That's everything.